Hey guys, it's Leigh with Still Raven Farms. Today, I want to talk to you guys about what I wish I had known before I had started homesteading. I want to be very clear before I go down deep into this. I would not change anything that has happened over the last 4 years, 3 years, 4 years, and technically longer than that because I have been canning for almost a decade or right at a decade. And I've been gardening for about the same amount of time. I've always loved plants. So I've always kind of played in the dirt. But this is our first real, well, I guess our second real homesteading effort, right? When we lived in Texas, I had a garden and, we had all the things, but we didn't have animals, but we had the garden. I was canning, we were starting to work through this process. And then when we moved to Georgia, we had to rent for quite a while before we got into a place where we were, ready to homestead and, buy the property. And I'm glad we waited because we waited, we were able to buy this property, instead of ending up in suburbia, which, we didn't buy a house in suburbia, but we rented in suburbia, and I'm really glad we waited to buy. But there are some very big things that I want to talk to you guys about when it comes to homesteading and what you should really consider before you get too in-depth in your journey. But if you're already kind of ass deep in the homesteading journey, this is still very relevant to you too. So the first thing and this is, come winter time, I'm done in the garden. I don't really have a whole lot going on outside of the house. This is really when I'm doing my planning, right? Here in about a week or so, I'm going to record a podcast where I take you with me as I'm going to walk you through our garden planning process and, what's going to go where and why and how and all of that stuff. I'm going to go through that with you. But winter time is usually, it's a much slower time for a lot of people. It is for us. We tend to work more at our normal jobs because that is, it's just slower on the homestead. So it's a good time to start, saving some money because come spring and summer, man, you just bleed green in the spring and summer because you're so busy, getting your garden seeds, your, soils, your compost, your whatever. Like there's a lot that goes into spring and summer, and it's a pretty expensive time of year for a lot of people. So with that, we're going to talk today about what I wish I had known before starting a homestead. And number one is defining success. That is the number one thing that I wish I had known prior to, because you're not going to feel successful until you can not only define success for you and your homestead and your family and whatever, but also what it's going to take to get there, right? And so that becomes the second step. And what I wish I had known was to set goals to achieve them, right? And we did, but we kept changing those goals because we kept changing our definition of success. And that's why that's number one. You want to sit there and say, oh, well, a successful homestead is one that pays for itself. Well, that's a great goal. That's a great dream, but how are you going to get there? And if you keep changing that marker, and changing that goalpost, you're never going to get there, right? So you and your partner and even your kids need to sit down and say, okay, what is a successful homestead? At what point do we say it was a success? And then set your goals based off of that definition of success. Set your goals. For us, our main goals and what we will deem a success is when we can raise, grow, source, whatever, 75% of our food and our animals' food from this farm, right? That is the like, oh, we made it, right? Because feed is expensive. And, it's interesting to me because my definition of expensive and your definition of expensive are probably going to be totally different. For us, when we first got into homesteading, a bag of feed at the feed store was like $12. Now it's 20. And so that really changes how you look at your homestead, right? Because you now have to, come to the decision of whether or not you can afford to feed these animals. And so making sure that you have that definition of success, setting those goals for that definition. So, for us, it's making sure that, the garden comes first. That's huge. And, whatever your goal is, make sure that it's attainable. You don't want to sit there and be like, well, I'm going to heat solely with wood. And that's my goal for my homestead. It will be a success if I can heat my home with wood harvested from my land, but the property that you bought doesn't have a freaking tree on it. Well, that's not going to be successful, right? You have to really look at what you can do. I want a garden that's going to supply 100% of my family's needs, but you live in Antarctica. That's just not going to happen. So maybe be realistic with the goals that you set. The other thing is paralysis by analysis. And y'all, this happens to everybody. It happens to me. I'm actually currently dealing with it because this is also the time of year where I sit down with Jared and we make our budget for the year or for the following year. And I'm like, I want to do this and I want to do this and I want to do this and I want to do this. And he's like, well, that's great, but you got to pick one. And I'm like, I don't know which one to pick. So right now, him and I are going through the process of really talking about what do we want to spend our money on this year? How much overtime are we actually willing to pick up? When are we going to pick those up? Like what projects have to be done versus what projects do we want to be done? Like one of the projects that I really want to be done is putting a wraparound deck on the house. Now, Jared can build the deck. That's not the problem. It's the financial side of it, right? Where we're sitting there going, okay, it's going to cost us, I don't know. We haven't actually fleshed this out yet, but we'll just throw a number out there. It's going to cost $25,000 to put a wraparound deck on the house. Okay, cool. Do we have that $25,000 that is, quote, disposable enough, right? Or are we looking at, we're going to put a side deck on and we're going to attach it to the front deck, right? Okay. But we're going to have to leave the back deck until next year. Is that feasible? And if it's not, well, we're going to put that money aside so that we have that money when we are ready to do the wraparound deck. But paralysis by analysis is something that I struggle with because I'm the planner, right? I do not function well without a plan. Now, I am also a chaos creator, which means that plan goes out the window in about 2.7 seconds after it's been created. But I feel better knowing that there is a plan. And it doesn't make any sense. And I know it doesn't make sense. But I feel better when I have a plan that says, okay, well, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And it doesn't matter if I'm doing step 4 and Jared's doing step 1, if it is all going to come together at the end. And so it's very, you should hear my garden plans. And like I said, I'm going to record that one later, but it is freaking hysterical because I make this beautiful, amazing color-coded garden plan and I have all my plants listed, how many I need and and everything's perfect. But come planting season, that goes out the freaking window and I am just going. And poor Jared, he's like, well, what's this? And I'm like, I don't know. What's this plant? I don't know. I thought you had a plan. I did. And that's my life. And poor Jared, he just puts up with me. So paralysis by analysis is making sure that you don't get so caught up in making the plans that you cannot execute them. Or you have so many decisions and you're not sure which one to go with next and you end up not making any decisions or moving forward at all. So make sure that you don't end up with paralysis by analysis just because you're so afraid to make a decision, right? And then this is one that nobody listens to. Nobody. There's not a single homesteader that's like, oh yeah, I did that. Not a single one. Don't let them lie to you. In fact, I'm sure somebody did. Like, if we're being absolutely honest, I'm sure that people do this, but I know so many more people that don't. And that is, put your garden in before you ever get livestock. Okay? Listen, I'm going to say it one more time. I need you to listen. Okay? Do not get livestock before your garden. Okay. And there's a lot of reasons for it, but the number one thing that I see happen is people are like, oh, well, I'm going to get goats and I'm going to put them over there. And they don't realize that over there is the best place for your garden. They're just like, I'm going to put them over there. And that's what we did, y'all. Like, that's exactly what we did. We were like, we're going to put the goats over there. And that was the garden space. And that's what ended up becoming the garden space. And thankfully, like, we moved the goats several times, and we knew that we were going to put our garden there, but we were just going to let them eat it down first. But the reality is that if you build a permanent fence, with concrete and the whole thing, like, that is going to be a livestock area. And then you turn around and you're like, but it gets great sun. I need to put my garden there. So just don't do it. The other thing is that you want to have at least some kind of the ability, right, to feed your animals out of the garden. And if you put the animals before the garden, you may not have enough space to feed your animals out of the garden because that garden is too busy feeding you, right? But I always try to tell people, like, listen, if you are going to get chickens can eat pretty much everything. My chickens eat everything. If you get pigs, they can eat pretty much anything. But if you get goats, they cannot eat everything. Now I give my goats a little bit here, a little bit there of something to see if they can tolerate it. But I don't give it to them without knowing that they can eat it, if that makes sense. Like, I'm not going to let them go to town on something that I don't know is okay. Now, what we also do is, towards the end of summer, beginning of fall, if I want my garden cleared out, and I do this all the time, if I want my garden cleared out, I don't just rip plants out of the ground. I let the goats eat them. And they will go through. Goats are very knowledgeable about what they can eat, what they want to eat, and what is harmful to them, and they won't eat it. Now, if it's the only thing they have, they will eat the thing that can kill them. But for the most part, if they have this wide variety of browse and grass and weeds and stuff, they will pick what they want to eat, and they will completely bypass what they don't want. And one of the perfect examples of this is we have, it's beefsteak mint, or it's something like it's in the mint family, but it's toxic to goats, and we have a ton of it. And it's interesting to me because the goats won't touch it. The babies won't touch it. Our two little does that we have, Stella's babies, they're for sale if anybody's interested. But they were getting out of the fence all summer long. It didn't matter what we did. They were getting out of the fence up until here recently. And they would go munch on whatever they found, but they stayed away from this particular, group of plants. And Jared and I are sitting there going, why aren't they eating that? Like, that's weird. And we didn't know what it was. And so Google Lens is amazing if you haven't, and this is, I don't get any sponsorship by Google. That would be amazing if I did, but Google Lens is amazing. It's an app that you can download, and you just take a picture of whatever it is, and Google will search it and then spit back results at you. And sometimes it's right and sometimes it's not. But that's how we found out that this particular plant is toxic to goats. But because they had all this browse, the babies and the adults knew not to eat it. And they never got into it. I'm going to go find some wood to knock on real quick. Hold on, stand by. Knock, knock, knock. Because it's my luck that I'll be like, they didn't get into it. And then tomorrow they're going to go out there and snarf it all down and they're going to die. Like, that's just how my luck works. And that's how goats work. But don't, to get back on point, don't get the animals before you get the garden. Get the garden in Make sure that the garden is going strong and producing before you get animals, especially chickens, because you can literally never buy a sack of grain for chickens if your garden produces. And that's a huge money saver. Like I spend probably $45 a month in chicken feed. In the winter, that goes up a little bit more, but that's about roughly what I spend a month in chicken feed. Just chickens is $45 a month, $60 a month, because we don't have the infrastructure to feed chickens out of the garden yet. It's coming, but they keep eating my garden, and that's a different podcast. Anyways, so garden before livestock. The next thing is I tell people, live in it for a season, right? And if you're an experienced gardener, if you're an experienced livestock owner, sure, you can do whatever. But if you are brand new to your homestead, you haven't lived on the property yet, wait, live in it for a season. And that actually goes towards everything. Don't paint over your fireplace until you have lived with it for a year. Make sure that that's the decision that you want to make. Don't put in a permanent fixture until you've lived in it for a season. And maybe I don't want that. And that has happened a lot to us. We were gonna get this huge goat barn, and then we were like, we just need something small for right now. And I'm glad we did, because if we had built it the way that I wanted it, that would have been a lot of wasted material, right? Greenhouse. Jared wanted a greenhouse almost immediately on moving in. And I said, no, I don't think we need a greenhouse. And then Blue knocked over all of my plant starts one year. And I was like, I need a freaking greenhouse. And he was like, told you. So whatever it is, live in it for a season, because you want to make sure that it's in the right spot. It's exactly what you want. You have the money saved for it, because you don't want to, drop $20,000 on something only to find out that not only is it the wrong size, it's in the wrong spot. You actually didn't really need it. We recently just had our well bladder replaced. Buddy of ours came over and helped us, but we lived with that smaller well bladder for 3 years before we were like, we probably really need to go ahead and get a different size one. Like, we've got animals that we water and da. And I'm glad we did. And it's been great in the, couple of weeks that we've had it. I'm glad we did it, but I'm also really glad that we waited, because if we had just jumped into it, we wouldn't be in the mindset of conserving that water. Okay, well, we can't sit there and take 4 showers, run the washer and the dishwasher, and expect to be able to go water the garden at the same time, and on those really dry days, we would run out of water in the garden, because our well bladder only held, I think it was like 40 gallons or something like that. And so it didn't hold a lot. And so after dealing with that, we have now gotten in the habit of conserving water. Okay, we're going to water from this time to this time, and then we'll let the bladder fill and we'll water from this time to this time. So live in it for a season. Try to figure out what you want. And then this one kind of flies in the face of that is, if you want it, get it. Okay, get it. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you how to live your life and how to spend your money, but I know how I operate. And I know that if it's pretty, and I use that term loosely because, again, my definition of pretty is way different than yours. My favorite color is black. Yours may not be. So my definition of pretty and yours is going to be totally different. But I love having statues in the garden. I love having raised bed gardens. And this year was a prime example of exactly what I'm going to tell you. I learned this season that I will spend way more time in the garden when I enjoy what it looks like, when I enjoy how that garden is situated. So I have my kitchen garden, and Jared did not want to put in a kitchen garden. He literally did it for me. He also did not want to build raised beds. He was like, I don't understand what the problem is about putting, plants in the ground. Like, what is the problem? And I'm like, I don't like it. I want my kitchen garden to have raised beds. And we went round and round and round about it. Now, Jared and I don't argue. At this point, we've been together for 20 years. We don't argue. It's very simply, he says something along the lines of, you're being unreasonable. And I tell him, you're being an asshole. And that's it, right? Like it's just not an argument. We're just like, whatever. And we move on, and there's no hard feelings. It's the reality. When you're together, and my older couples that have been together forever, you know what I'm talking about. The younger couples are going, no, we're going to fight this out. And the older couples are like, I'm tired. And that's where Jared and I are at. Like, we're tired. We got other shit to deal with. But that all being said, Jared finally relented when he saw me out there building these beds. And we have discussed in previous, podcasts that I don't build things because it looks like a fun house when I'm done. And he saw me building these beds and he was like, absolutely not. So he was like, I'm going to build them because you're terrible at it. And I was like, okay. And I got what I wanted, right? And that was not a manipulation. I was going full tilt. I was going to build all 14 of these beds. And he came in and he was like, absolutely not, because they're going to look terrible and I'm going to have to fix them. So we're going to build them right the first time. And I'm like, okay. And we got all 14 of them built. And, I paid the boys to help me, fill them up with the animal bedding and the soil and compost and all that. And that garden did 100 times better than our kitchen or our big garden did. And it was because I was always in the garden. Like I literally, I went out and I bought chairs and I bought tables and I did all of the things because I loved being in that garden space. And so with that in mind, if that is something that you want to encourage you to be in that space, do it. Of course, don't spend your electric bill or your water bill money on, or rent money or whatever on decorations for your garden. But if that is what's going to put you in the garden, do what you got to do. My garden is my favorite thing, second to the goats, homestead wise. Because if I was, if I lived in the city, I'd still have my dogs. I'm talking homestead wise. My goats and my garden are my favorite thing. And so if it is going to encourage me to stay in the garden or go to the garden, yeah, I'm going to go. I have a peacock, metal peacock thing. It's like a wall art thing that's on my fence in the garden. It's ugly as sin. I don't care. It's in there. It makes me happy. I have a little dragon statue that's in there. I've got I have dinosaur statues. I've got all sorts of stuff because it makes me happy. I've got a wood placard thing that says the witch is in, and it's got like little witch boots on it. It's my thing. Like I love stuff like that. And so I am more likely to play in the garden when I am surrounded by things that make me happy. And that's great. That's what you should be doing. And so Jared relented, and because he saw how well the kitchen garden did because I was always in it, and how poorly the big garden did because I was never in it. Like I went in there and I would go, I'd spend 20 minutes in there tying up tomato plants or, pulling a weed here or there, but I didn't go in there that often because I didn't want to be in there. So make sure that if you want it, you get it. And this is the third part to that whole thing. Just because it's cute doesn't mean you need it. Okay? Don't waste your money on garden statues if you cannot afford to get seeds for the garden. Okay? If you can't buy seeds because you spent all your dollars on a gnome statue, your priorities are not in the right spot. Okay? And I know that I just said, if you want it, get it, but make sure that your priority is right. And that's where I screwed up. My priority was not correct because I did not make sure that I had plenty of time and money. And I went into the big garden. I didn't do it. I hung out in my kitchen garden, and the big garden suffered because of that. So it is very much a game of, percentages and ratios and, making sure that you do the right thing and all that, but be kind. Right. The last thing that it's the second to last thing. Infrastructure is not built in a day. Y'all do not. That was our biggest problem with 2022 was we spent the entire year busting tail trying to get everything done. And in the end, we got practically nothing done because we were so like, got to do this, got to do this, got to do this, got to do this. And it was just this constant struggle of we were getting so overwhelmed. Jared and I were not talking about our priorities the correct way and really getting on the same page. I'd be like, well, I want this done. And he's like, well, I'm doing this. And I'm like, but I want this done. And we weren't talking. And it was a huge mess. 2022 was probably not a great year for us. 2023 wasn't a great year for the garden, but it was a great year for Jared and I because we got our priorities together. So just realize that it's okay if you don't get it done. I have a saying, and I know it's super morbid, but guys, remember my job. Remember what I do for a living. Dark humor and a morbid sense of humor are the two things that keep me sane-ish. If I die tomorrow, it's not my problem. Okay, that's the thing. If I was to, everyone talks about, well, if you were to die tomorrow, how would you, whatever the hell it is. Like, people sit there and say it all the time, where they're like, don't put off to tomorrow what you could get done today. And I'm sitting there going, y'all, if I drop dead tonight, suddenly the garden being done or not done is not going to be my problem because I ain't going to be here. Okay. And when I adopted that mindset of, if it don't get done, it doesn't get done. That was so freeing because I literally was like, oh, well, if it don't get done, it don't get done. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. And it was so great. So realize that if you don't have the money to put in the decks, okay. It's okay. Unless you have a back deck like ours, which is literally about to fall off the house, don't worry about it. It's okay. And you know what, guys? The back deck's about to fall off the damn house. And guess what we do? We lock the door so nobody can go out on the back deck. Simple enough. And it's not actually about to fall off the house. There's just some rotting boards the reality is we could just replace the boards and the deck would last us a few more years, but we want a bigger deck. And so that's what we're going to do. And so in order to keep people safe, we lock the door when people come over so they don't go out on the back deck and accidentally fall through a board. But understand that I would rather have my side deck in my kitchen garden right now than a back deck where it's hot all day and I can't enjoy it. So there's this give and take, and just understand that it's okay. It's all right. Because if you die today or tomorrow, it's not going to be your problem. It's fine. So I know it's morbid. I know it's crazy. I know people are like, I can't believe you said that. Well, it's the reality. Okay. If you take everything out of it and you look at the facts very logically, if you die, it's not going to be your problem. It's going to be somebody else's problem. So relax. It's going to be okay. And then the very, very last thing that I have for you guys today is give yourself grace. Okay. Give yourself kindness. Understand that you are not going to be perfect, and that is okay. It is okay. Jared built the greenhouse. Is it perfect? Nope. But I love it. I love it because of its imperfections. I love the fact that, it's random colors and it's, black and it's this and it's this. And I love it because Jared built me a greenhouse. I could give two flying fucks if that thing fell down. Well, I would care because then Jared would be upset that his hard work was shot to fuck, right? But the reality is that I don't care that it's not perfect. Jared built me a greenhouse. And when he builds me my decks, I don't care if they're perfect. He built me my decks. He knew the thing that was going to make me happy, and he did it for me. And that's what I care about. I don't care when it comes to me. If I don't get the garden in perfectly, okay, it sucks, but I give myself grace. And I tell myself that I'm learning. And y'all, I am learning. And you're going to be doing this for 15 years, and you're still going to be learning. You're going to be learning how, why did my tomato plant suddenly just keel over dead? I don't know. Let's go find out. You could be a lifelong goat herder and you're going to have one die on you and you're going to go, how the hell did that happen? I don't know. We're going to figure it out. It's okay. And so I want you guys to give yourself grace. I want you guys to understand that you're learning and it is okay. It's okay to be learning. It's okay to figure it out. And like I tell my kids all the time, it is okay to be nervous. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to fail. It is not okay to quit. And that's what we're all about. We're not going to quit. We're going to give ourselves grace. We're not going to judge others, and we're going to knock it out of the park. Hopefully. Y'all have a good day.